Hello and welcome back to AMA Junior Camp. This is our conversation series, and it's so good to see you guys again. We had a great week of camp, and just to finish it out here, we've got an amazing individual who's going to join us today. Um, Varied background in model aviation. Look forward to having him discuss that with you guys. Right now, he's the head of the NASA subscale research team at the Armstrong Flight Research Center, and I'm going to jump right into it. This is the only individual we've had with junior camp who's been at every junior camp that we've actually done. So the third time's the charm. Once again, welcoming Red Jensen to the conversation. And so excited to have you back here with us again, Red.
Hey, Kyle, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Oh, man. You've got such an amazing background in model aviation, and it's taken you to such great heights, if you'll pardon the pun. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you really did get started in aviation.
Well, it's one of those weird things. I just was always around it. My father was into model airplanes and full-scale aviation, and I don't ever remember a time where, some people have a light switch that's flipped or a moment in time where they say, oh, I like airplanes now. It was never that for me. It was always there, always an addiction, and I just don't know when to quit, I suppose.
Well, that's okay, because you're doing amazing things. So don't quit, Red.
Yeah. So my earliest memories are going to the flying field with my dad, and I've made lifelong friends from the flying field. It seems like people in aviation are the nicest people, and I've met more friends that way than really anything else. So very thankful for it, and I try to give back whenever I can.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving back here on this live stream. It's great to have you as a part of our junior camp, as always. You mentioned your dad and going to the flying field with him, really being able to enjoy that time with your father. That's pretty cool. Who are some of the other mentors that you've had that have helped you throughout?
Oh, man, there have been so many, it'd be tough to list. But I will say in general, some folks in the sailplane community. So I credit sailplanes with not only teaching me the bulk of what I know about aerodynamics, but also making me a much better pilot. So, with a sailplane, you have no motor to bail you out. Setup is more critical, and efficiency and all that. So, if you guys like Mark Allen, Daryl Perkins, Ron Van, if you're in the soaring world, you would know those names. And, they each taught me something different, even if they don't realize they did or not. There were countless other folks as well. My parents obviously supported all of this the whole time and really encouraged it. And, I really have them to thank for all this.
Nice. Okay, well, kind of the flip side of that same coin or question, we asked about your mentors. Who are your heroes? Who do you look up to, and who do you seek to emulate, maybe?
Yeah, I don't have too many heroes, I would say. There are people that I would like to emulate, and, I'm not into stick and ball sports at all. So my heroes aren't that type, and they're not, say actors or musicians or anything like that. But, people, within the industry, like people like Kelly Johnson, who was the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works and did so many amazing things. People I work with like Al Bowers, who really brought me under his wing for the whole Prandtl flying wing thing. If you guys are familiar with that, I had a ton to learn there. I was naive going into that, and I knew I was naive. And in fact, I told Al, I don't really understand this, but I'm going to trust you. And, together we worked it all out. So, those are the types of people that I sort of gravitate to. And then, of course, friends, in air racing and model aviation and all that kind of stuff. And there's a photo of the Prandtl wing there. And why that's significant is because it has no vertical tail, much like a bird. And there have been other aircraft that don't have vertical tails. But what makes this different is it doesn't need a computer to keep it stable. It's purely an aerodynamic solution. So it's a simple 2-channel model. I have elevator and aileron or elevon control, so pitch and roll only. And it generates what we call proverse yaw. So the nose rolls in the direction of the turn. So if you roll right, the nose yaws right at the same time, auto-coordinating things, which is, it's not a new theory at all. It was first postulated in 1933, but I believe we are the first to gather data and sort of prove that theory rather than just anecdotally.
Yeah, well, and we've got some great videos too. Don't leave this one yet, but after you're done, go to AMA and look up some of those videos with Al Bowers. I know he presented during our AMA Expo series several times. Some great information to be had there.
Yeah, Al's fantastic, and he was a great mentor too, and he really let me see what I'd hoped to see when I joined NASA. I'd hoped to be witness to some cool X-plane or something like that when I first started at NASA, and will be able to tell my grandkids about it or something like that. Little did I know that I was going to be involved with something so cool right off the bat. So I feel like I've peaked.
I'm sure you didn't peak early there, Red. I mean, and that actually brings up the next question. What are you working on right now at NASA? But also, maybe aside from the Prandtl wing, what are some of the highs, so to speak? Where were some of those great things that you were able to be a part of?
Yeah, so NASA is a very diverse sort of organization. We don't study one thing in particular. We like to joke that we're the first A in NASA, which is National Aerospace and or Aeronautics. I'm sorry, and Space Administration. So we're all aeronautics for the most part, although we do dabble in some of the space stuff. But right now the big push is for urban air mobility, which means flying taxis in and around urban environments and delivering packages and things like that. So we're not developing a vehicle to do that, but we are developing software and guidelines to allow the general public and corporations to develop their own. So we're doing things like vision-based landing systems. Right now a full-scale airliner can land with a computer with an ILS system or a Cat 3 autopilot, something like that. But we're trying to develop something where it's solely vision-based, where you can pick out a landing site purely by picture and go and land there. So that's not really common in the full-scale world. We're doing see and avoid type algorithms. So having, say, acoustic-based sensors on board an aircraft that can hear another vehicle approaching, recognize its direction, triangulate its position, and then move out of the way, things like that. So again, it's sort of a misnomer. We don't necessarily develop aircraft themselves, although sometimes we do, but really in large part, we develop processes, procedures to enable other folks to do that.
You invent the things that make the things that people invent safe and practical and functional.
Yeah, I like to say that we work on the stuff that costs too much, or the minutia that the for-profit company wouldn't look for. So we research that sort of thing and then add to that knowledge base.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, it brings up a question. How has your model aviation experience really influenced how you work and what you do?
Yeah, well, it's directly applicable. We operate large model aircraft for the most part, and anybody who walked into my lab and saw some of the stuff that we work on would instantly recognize many things: servos, engines, airframes, control linkage, things like that. That's all very familiar. Where it's different is how we utilize them. So often they're integrated with instrumentation that the general public would not understand or have any awareness of. Cameras, radars, autopilots, lidars, acoustic sensors. You name it. So we tend to use as much off-the-shelf stuff as we can get, because it makes my job easier. If you have to invent everything every time, it's very tedious. We don't do anything in serial production. Everything is a one-off. So anything that I can pull off the shelf and use, we do. So that's where my model airplane background comes in, sourcing parts, knowing what's good quality stuff. And then beyond that is the piloting ability. So it's a big deal to be able to fly these vehicles when things aren't going right. So we operate as what we call a safety pilot, which means if the autopilot doesn't work or something breaks, we disconnect all of that stuff, and it's straight what we call stick to surface. So no stabilization, none of that on board. So if you're talking, 300 plus pound or more vehicles with something going wrong, you have to have above average pilot skills to recover that sort of thing. So it all helps.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of pilot skills, you've got those in spades when it comes to model aviation, but are you a full-scale pilot as well?
I am. I got my license, it's been in my 20s. And, like most people in aviation, I have not owned a plane up to this point, so I've been renting or begging or borrowing. So building hours is tough, and obviously it's not my vocation. So I'm a relatively low-time pilot compared to most. But, I love it, and I fly any chance I get.
Yeah, that's really neat. Well, and you fly anytime you get a chance. You're out flying, for work as well. Although, let's call it what it is. It's play, and it's amazing. And, I'm a little bit jealous every day, but that's okay. But also, I was at home this summer, and I'm kind of flipping through channels and looking around, and all of a sudden there's the Reno Air Race. and it focuses on what I think is a pretty familiar face. I'm like, is that Red Jensen over there? I think it is. You were there helping on the crew for number 79, Justin Phillipson, with no strings attached.
Yep.
And I called my boys in and my wife, hey, everybody come here, look at that. Here's Red. So tell us about that experience and what you were doing there.
Well, Reno has been a long time addiction for me, just like any other model airplane or any other aviation event. I tend to like it. Well, Reno's pretty special. My first year going to Reno was in 1979. I was 9 years old. My parents took me, and it was one of those things where, maybe that was a light switch moment, I guess. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I love racing. This is so cool. So I've been every single year since, save for 3. So, mostly a fan, and, more recently become, I guess, what you'd call a super fan. So Justin and I have been friends for quite a while, and, I started helping him out. I'm now crew chief on his race number 79. So I help out, all race week, basically take the stress off of him. Justin's a do-it-all guy. He and his brother, designed and built these aircraft themselves, so they're more than capable of doing everything. But, during race week, I'm making sure he stays safe. There's fuel in the plane, check the oil, change the prop if we have to, whatever we have to do to make sure the aircraft is safe, help him strap in, get our spot on the runway when it's time to race, all that kind of stuff. So I particularly love the Formula One class. One, for its simplicity, but 2, because it offers the armchair aerodynamicist and builder a chance to really compete on a national stage. So these are kind of the last affordable race planes. Most everything else is out of reach, at least for a guy like me. I'm just a normal working stiff. So I really dig Formula One.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you dig it enough to have a few things going on in the background there, too, that I want to hear more about. So if you weren't with us for the first 2 junior camps, a couple years ago, we saw some planes and things stacked up on top of, what looks like a table behind you. And then the next year, you kind of dropped a few hints and said, we're going to start working on this thing behind me. So for those who haven't seen those, go back and watch them after this. But for now, I want to hear from Red on what's behind you and what's going on.
Yeah. So, being the addict that I am, my dream is to race a Formula One airplane at Reno. And like everything else I do, I'm not happy with most things that you can buy. I need to design it and build it myself. So I've kind of gone off the deep end, and I've designed and am building my own Formula One race plane. And, maybe I can show you a little bit of it here. You'll have to use your imagination a little bit. It's on its side right now, but this is the fuselage plug for the airplane that I've designed. It's called Impulse, and you can see it's a VTail. So right now, I'm working on, these boards right here are called a splitter board, and I'm making a mold. So I'm making the upper half of the fuselage mold, in this case, the left half. So that's what's going on right now. I'm fairly far along in the process. These are the last 2 molds that I have to make, and then all the molds are done, and I can start making, real parts.
Nice. Well, and, one of the things that I love about the process that you're doing there, and, the techniques, the challenges, quite frankly, and how you're overcoming them, how you're using different elements. It's amazing to watch and see. And you've been able to share that on YouTube. And you kind of go through that mold making process, the filler, the smoothing, the sanding, all the techniques that go into it.
Yeah. So, the funny thing is this is just a giant model airplane at this stage anyway. And all of these molding techniques that I've done and am employing, I learned building high performance model sailplanes and high performance model racing aircraft. So it's not terribly difficult. It is labor intense, but anybody can do it, and it's low cost. And you can make shapes that you can't really otherwise get via some of the other methods. So for me, I'm very comfortable working with composites, and you can see the canopy mold down there underneath. You can see how nice and shiny that is. And the reason I do that is because I want high quality, lightweight finished parts. And then should the need ever arise, I can build more parts. So I'm spending quite a bit of time making this tooling up front that will be useful, in later stages when I, should I ever need parts, or heaven forbid somebody else wants one, we can make that happen.
Yeah. Go ahead and knock out 2 or 3 at once for us.
Yeah, no thanks. The molds are available. I don't know if I am or not.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe the expertise won't come with it, right?
Yeah.
No, it's really been really intriguing to watch that process. As someone who hasn't laid in carbon fiber, I've done a little bit of fiberglassing, but to see this level of craftsmanship, quite frankly, is really cool to watch. It's the same reason I watch people like Mike Pate, and all those processes are just really, really fun to get involved with.
Yeah, it's not difficult. A lot of people think that composite structures are black magic, and it's really not. The biggest thing that I've learned with composites is patience. It takes a while, and you can't really force it. And the more time you take in the beginning to make it as correct as possible, the better outcome you'll have, because once you have a mold, it's a direct mirror image of the time that you spent on the male pattern or the plug. So it is time consuming, but I think it'll be worth it in the end.
Yeah, I think so too. It's going to be really fun to see. So you're still plugging away at it. That wasn't a pun intentionally.
No, I say that all the time.
Do you have any expectation of when you might be ready to start, putting pieces together? Or
well, it always takes way longer than you think it does. I've estimated that mold making takes about 10 times the amount of time as building an actual part. So now that I'm nearing the end of that mold making phase, which has been a couple of years, there's a lot going on here. I think I can have major sub-assemblies done probably by the end of this year. And it'll be flying a year or two after that, something like that.
Nice. Now, why is it, and I expect that I know the reason, but why did you go with the VTail instead of a traditional, horizontal stabilizer, vertical stabilizer?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really all about intersection drag. So anytime you have a corner, an inside corner, this area in here makes drag, and it's more than if you have the same amount of area, passing straight by. So the VTail has one less angle or one less intersection than a traditional cruciform tail. And it's all about tail volume. So if you have the proper tail volume, a VTail really works no differently than a standard tail. So for me, it's all about drag reduction. This airplane is really no compromises. It's not designed to be a sport plane or a cross-country cruiser or anything like that. Every single part of it is optimized to the best of my ability with every trick that I know how to do in order to go fast around the race course at Reno. So, for those reasons, it might go pretty fast, but it's going to be a horrible sport plane. It's not going to be very comfortable to fly. There's no suspension in the landing gear. There's going to be no seat. It's going to be a carbon fiber, just a shell. So, it's all a trade-off, just like everything with aviation. It's all about compromise. So I've made these compromises to design something that I hope will go as fast as possible.
Yeah, not comfortable, but really quick, right?
Right. You forget about the discomfort when you're going fast, I suppose.
Go fast enough. That's taking your attention, right?
Yeah.
So I got a question for you too. And so you talked about those drag forces when it comes to those pieces. Does it change if instead of like a 90-degree, it turns into a curve? And
it does
gets a lot less?
And also the angles too. So, a right angle or an acute angle is worse than an obtuse angle. So the closer you can get to straight, the better. I'm at about 110 degrees between the V's, which is optimal between control and stability from the experimenting that I've done and reading and, talking to other folks and things like that. So, it all matters. There's a great body of work by a guy named Mike Arnold, who designed a plane called the AR-5 and then later the AR-6, which is a Formula One airplane. And he has this theory called inverse pressure gradient matching, where you, as the air goes around any body, it's just a fluid like water or something like that. And you want to match the pressure gradient. So if you have a high pressure in one place, you want to try to have a low pressure in a matching place. So they kind of help each other out. And I've done that, with this aircraft. And someday when we have some more time, I can explain that a little further. But, things like the cheek to cheek cowls are staggered. The tails are staggered. They're not, in a straight line like you would normally expect. So just little things like that in every area possible to try to make it go fast.
That's cool. Well, I look forward to seeing it.
Me too.
Maybe in a couple of years, at the Reno races. And, definitely if people want to stick around and watch that progress take place, you are posting videos. Take a look. The greatest thing about your videos too, Red, I believe you mostly post them on YouTube, but you get to see a little bit of your other life as well. And, one of the things that was really fun for me to see that you got to do over the weekend was take your son and go to a flying event, right?
Yeah, I love that. My dad took me to flying events when I was a kid, and he's gone now, so I don't get to enjoy that anymore. But, taking Ryan, he loves to fly, and he's a very good pilot too. He's got a lot of raw talent. He just needs to refine it. So, we're flying a slope flying event this weekend, and he's flying combat, trying to physically hit other airplanes, which he just loves that, doesn't get that. So yeah, we go flying any chance we can get. And, anytime I can drag him along, or any of my other kids or wife or whoever wants to go, I love to do that. Again, for me, it's mostly about visiting with other folks. But and there's my daughter Taylor saying hi. Yeah, she was a pretty good pilot too, but she quit. So yeah, it's all about the social part for me. I've flown so much over the years. I still love to fly, but when I go to these sorts of things, it's of course, letting my son fly, and then visiting with friends.
Yeah, that's a really cool aspect of it. Well, you've been steeped in aviation since you can remember. It'd be interesting to get your perspective on how things are changing in the aviation landscape. Where do you see it progressing over the course of the next few years? And then maybe the flip side of what surprised you over the past few years that's really, kind of come out of left field, if anything.
Sure. So, where it's going, I think, is in general is more autonomy. And typically when I say that, or when somebody else says that, people start to freak out. You're like, oh my gosh, we need pilots. We absolutely need pilots. There'll never be a flying job that doesn't require a pilot. And, I don't think we're ever going to be at a point where you're getting on an airliner with 300 people and there's no pilot on board. I just don't think that's realistic. I think it's totally within the realm of technology. It's totally possible. But, for me, I would have a hard time getting on board an airplane without a pilot, even though I live in autonomy, and I understand what its limitations are and also what it can do. So I think we're going to see more of that. The drone delivery thing is going to happen. It may not be in the form that we're thinking it's going to be now. It might not be Starbucks or Amazon or something like that. But there's going to be an element to that. And there's also going to be an element to, air taxis. And I think that probably will end up being unpiloted at some point, the 1 to 6 people sort of a thing. It just makes a lot of sense. So, what has surprised me is maybe people's lack of not really reception to it, but understanding. The typical knee-jerk reaction is that'll never happen. And I'm always a proponent, like, it's absolutely going to happen whether you like it or not. And we can either help it along the way and help shape the future and make it safe and reliable, or we can stick our heads in the sand and keep saying that it's not going to happen and it's going to pass us by. So that's where I think it's going.
Nice. It's obvious that you've kept your kids involved in aviation. I love that, you took Ryan. I'm sure you've taken Taylor before to different events and all that. But, how do maybe kids get involved and staying involved in aviation that may be attending our junior camp? And then also, how do adults, help that process along?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So when I was, growing up, clubs were the thing. There was no such thing as park flying. Obviously no internet. You waited for the Tower Hobbies catalog or the, RCM magazine or Model Aviation or something like that to come in the mail so you could see the latest thing and, maybe make a phone call or something like that. Now with information being disseminated instantly in real time, like we're doing right now, it's more of an instant gratification thing. And I don't really know the answer to that. I see fewer and fewer young folks being involved. In fact, Ryan was the only minor at this whole event. There was 200 pilots there. He was the only one that was a kid there, which is unfortunate. The way I do it locally is, through NASA and through the local club, we reach out to the Boy Scouts and things like that. I also take the time to talk to anybody that wants to ask, via Facebook or something like that, because it is important. But more importantly than that, STEM, science, technology, education in general is exactly where NASA draws from for future employees. So it's incredibly important for us as an agency to, cultivate these sorts of things and support STEM as much as possible. So, the hobby itself is changing with, the rate of fly stuff and multi-rotors and a lot of electronic components and, technology and things like that, which I love. It's great. But the people that don't embrace that change and say, oh, it's ruining the hobby or this or that, to me, I think that's short-sighted and, self-serving. It doesn't help the modeling community as a whole. So I do whatever I can.
Yeah, certainly. Well, we appreciate it. And, to that end, we have so many different volunteers, people that step up within their local communities and do just that. They're willing to give kids balsa gliders and tell them how to make them fly, because they don't just automatically do it. You got to get that balance right.
That's right.
They're willing to build a craft with a classroom or talk to a homeschool group or, a church group, whatever it is, and get people interested. What I tell people is, just like aviation exploded in the 20s and got so huge, we're right on the cusp of that same thing happening again with autonomy in flight and the need to have pilots both in aircraft and on the ground piloting those aircraft, and the skills and know-how that goes into making that work in the future. The industry is going to be calling for so much when it comes to talented individuals. And that's what model aviation is teaching and training, and where people can fulfill that. And not only that, it's all good to make a living doing what you love. Like, that's okay. You can leave work and then go fly a sailplane or whatever it is.
Yeah, I never imagined that I would make a living in model aviation. And it was always get a job to buy airplanes. And, now it is my job. And so I would encourage folks that, maybe this is a path they want to pursue. It's an exploding industry. We're clamoring for good model builders, and we're going through hiring process right now at work. And when I tell people that I'd take a modeler over somebody who's maybe college educated, that doesn't have a modeling background, it's sort of weird. But I tell them that, like, if you give me a modeler that's been doing this for 10 or more years, right? They have a fantastic understanding of aerodynamics. They have a basic understanding of electronics. They can solder. They might even be able to write a little bit of code. They understand computer programming in such a way that it relates to a transmitter system. They might have some experience with video systems and RF and antennas and things like that. And unfortunately, there just is not a college curriculum that supports all of that. Now, I'm not downplaying college educated folks at all. We need that, but for what I do and in my industry, if you don't have a modeling background, you can have every degree in the world, and it's not going to help.
That practical experience, you can't teach it from a book, and it's really hard to pick it up if you haven't done it and been there and been exposed to it.
Well, the biggest thing is I can't teach them how to fly. You're flying, pick your price number airplane, right? These things are irreplaceable in some cases, and it can't be a low experienced person. It just can't. So that's tough to find. So dang it, keep flying and keep building skills. We need you.
Yeah. Well, as far as, a call to action, go out and fly a model plane. That's not a tough one. That's not a hard sell.
No.
And maybe the tougher sell is when you go out as maybe an AMA member, for those that are watching, or even just someone who's in the hobby, I'm not going to discriminate. Be willing to teach. Be willing to, safely land the aircraft that you're piloting, of course, close it down, make sure everything's okay. But then talk to that person who's, bugging you at the flying field or bugging you at the park or wherever you may be, because that's our future. And if nothing else, you'll find a new friend if, someone comes in and they want to fly with you. That's great.
Absolutely. And, for you folks out there that might be considering, a job like this, it's going to sound funny, but the most important flight control that you can learn is the rudder. Sounds, benign, right? But it's the absolute truth. It is the key to precision flying. Not only takeoff and landing, but everything else and all the unusual attitudes and aerobatics in between. We have a saying at work that we like to banter about, and that's the center line is reserved for professionals. And it's kind of a joke, but what it really means is, can you fly a straight line? Can you land and take off in a straight line? And it's a bigger deal than you would imagine when it matters, right? When you're just out flying for fun, it kind of doesn't matter, right? So practice rudder, kids.
That's a good lesson for me too, Red. I need to practice my rudder too. Well, this one's might be a tough question to answer. I don't know, but aside from building model aircraft, flying model aircraft, flying full-scale aircraft, building full-scale aircraft, do you have other hobbies? What else occupies your day?
So my son and I are restoring a 1965 Galaxy muscle car. There it is right there. So, that's mostly be him. He's the gearhead. I'm a gearhead too. I grew up loving race cars. I love all motorsports. I went to Bonneville for the first time ever for the land speed trials a couple years ago, and that's amazing. I'm very fortunate enough to live less than an hour away from El Mirage Dry Lake, where they do the same sort of thing, but on dirt instead of salt. That's amazing. I ride motorcycles. I've tried to play guitar. I'm horrible at it. I'm not the artistic type at all, but most things involve aviation or motorsports. That's just how it is.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent answer. I've been enjoying those videos too. So good job, Ryan. Way to keep Dad after it.
Yeah.
Well, hey, one last question to close us out. What is it that I should have asked, Red? What is in the back of your mind that you think, man, this is great to get out there. Let's make sure we make it happen.
Man, that's a tough one. But I would say, for me, I'm a voracious reader. I read everything from print to digital media, message boards, everything in between. And no matter how much drivel you think there might be there is always some nugget to learn. And I learn something new every single day. And I'm always amazed by that. So I would say, you didn't, I don't know if you should have asked me this or not, but, be curious. And, instead of blindly taking for gospel what somebody's told you, or maybe something that's printed in an instruction manual or something like that, experiment a little. And one quick example I can give of that is the center of gravity. And even to some extent control throws. The manufacturer of what you build or buy will give you a set of guidelines, and many people take that for gospel, and it's a great starting place. But it's just that. It's just a starting place. Find out what works for you. Play with the center of gravity and move it around. That there is no perfect center of gravity for an airplane. There's the one that works for you. And often it's wildly different than what the manufacturer recommends. So experiment, keep it in bounds. You can get into trouble by going too far forward or too far out.
Little changes at a time.
But learn what that does. And that's a massive education. So, just be curious, ask questions. Yeah. Don't take everything at face value. Listen to it. I mean, if it's coming from an established source, do it. But, then play with it.
Awesome. Well, Red, it's been a pleasure speaking with you again, hearing about some of the progress, sharing some of that progress with the viewers. I highly encourage folks to jump into that YouTube stream and watch some of the awesome stuff you guys are doing. There's also a Facebook area where people can go to learn more, and a website for the F1 racer that you're developing, right?
Yep, absolutely. So if you are on Facebook, just search Impulse IF1. The name of the airplane is Impulse, and IF1 is the class, so which is International Formula One. So impulseif1.com is the website, and that will direct you hopefully to the Facebook page. If not, just search my name or Impulse IF1, and hopefully you'll find us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, there's some great stuff out there. You've got some really cool stickers. I know you're going to work on some T-shirts coming up. He's got some Chuck gliders as well that are awesome. I may or may not have one of those stickers on my flight helmet with paramotor, just so I feel like I'm going faster. But it's all really cool.
Well, it's all ground bound for now. It's all pictures and videos at this point. Nothing's been proven, but I'm confident it'll fly. I don't know if it'll be fast or not. I hope it is, but wait and see. We'll both find out together. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to it. Maybe someday I'll get out there. You can put me to work sweeping up the shop or something. I'd love to have you. All right. We'll make it happen someday. But until then, I'll be around. Red's right there. You can get a hold of him if you ever need. And if you have questions for me, of course, reach out to education@modelaircraft.org. As far as closing out junior camp and having a great conversation, Red, we look to you every year and we love doing it. And thank you so much for being a part. As people go through their junior camp, of course, remember, if you get done with all the lessons, get done with all the conversations, we have tons more available. There's a lot of great stuff out there. So, jump in, enjoy it. We've got 3 years now worth of lessons and educational opportunities for you to enjoy. So,
well, thank you very much for having me, and See you folks around.
See y'all later.